Imagine a father who owned almost nothing, yet gave everything. A man who slept on the streets, worked under the sun, and endured every hardship. Not for himself, but for his daughters. This is the inspiring story of Mr. Obi, a humble shoemaker whose love and sacrifice changed the destiny of his family forever. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this emotional journey of hope, determination, and the unbelievable power of a parent's love. Ingi, in the heart of the bustling Onitsha market, under a worn-out blue umbrella, sat a man named Obi. His clothes were simple, his tools old, and his table tiny, but his heart was full of dreams. Every morning, long before the sky turned from grey to blue, Obi was already at his post. You could hear the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of his hammer, the gentle pull of thread as he stitched sandals, and the soft buffing sound as he polished boots to a perfect shine. He had one singular, unwavering goal: to give his twin daughters Kamsi and Kachi a future that was brighter and better than anything he had ever known. Obi, success wasn't measured by the weight of coins in his pocket or the size of his home. No, success was the vision he held in his heart. Seeing his daughters live the life he could only dream of, he worked tirelessly, day in and day out. The scorching sun beat down on his back. The sudden downpours of the rainy season soaked him through, and the constant dust of the market settled on him like a second skin. None of it stopped him. He faced each day with a quiet resolve, his hands becoming rougher, his body growing wearier, but his spirit remaining unbroken. And every single evening, he would walk home, his shoulders slumped from fatigue, but a smile would always grace his lips, even when the pockets of his worn shirt carried more dust than money. He had his girls to go home to, and that made every hardship worth. Obi's wife, Chima, had once shared his dreams. In the early days of their marriage, they would sit together and imagine a life of comfort and opportunity for their children. But as the years passed, the relentless grip of poverty became heavier. It wasn't just a lack of money. It was a constant, pressing weight on their spirits. The roof of their small home leaked whenever it rained, the sound of dripping water a constant reminder of their struggle. Dinner was sometimes nothing more than a bowl of soaked gari, a meager meal to quiet their rumbling stomachs. The small, happy arguments of a young couple slowly turned into bigger, more painful ones, fueled by stress and despair. One evening, Obi managed to save a little extra. He walked home with a small, brightly colored toy clutched in his hand, a surprise for his daughters. He imagined their squeals of delight, their happy faces. But as he approached his home, an unusual silence greeted him. The usual sounds of laughter and play were absent. He pushed open the door and found the room still and empty. His heart began to pound. On the small wooden table, a folded note lay waiting. It carried a message that would shatter his world and change his life forever. In Chima's familiar handwriting, the words read, "Obi, I cannot continue like this. Take care of the children." Chima had left. The world seemed to spin around Obi. The toy fell from his hand. He sank to his knees on the cold, hard floor. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the cracked walls, the old, leaking roof, the empty doorway where his wife used to stand. It all felt so final, so devastating. And then, he felt two small hands clinging to his. Kamsi and Kachi were there, their innocent eyes wide with confusion, not understanding the weight of the moment, only knowing that their father was in pain. From that night onward, the weight on Obi's shoulders doubled. He was no longer just a father. He was now a father and a mother, the sole guardian of his daughter's fragile world. In a community as tight-knit as theirs, news travels fast. The story of Obi's wife leaving spreads through the market like wildfire. People whispered as he walked by. Some laughed cruelly, their amusement a sharp sting. Others judged him, their faces masks of disapproval. He heard their comments, carried on the market breeze. He has only daughters. Who will carry his name? One would say he is suffering for nothing. Another would mutter, why waste so much money on girls? They will just marry and leave. The words were like tiny daggers aimed at his already wounded heart. Obie heard it all, every last mocking word, but he never replied. He never defended himself or spoke ill of the wife who had left him. He simply lowered his head and continued his work, his focus unshaken. At home, his demeanor changed. He would gently wipe his daughter's tears when they missed their mother. When they asked the difficult questions about why she was gone, he spoke only kind words about her, refusing to let any bitterness or resentment poison their young hearts. The elders in the community, with what they considered good intentions, advised him to remarry. Find a new wife, Obie, they'd say. A woman to help you raise the children. But he would firmly shake his head each time. No one will come between me and my daughters, he would declare with quiet strength. I will raise them myself. The world looked at him and called him stubborn, a fool. But Obie knew what it truly was. It was love. Too. As the years passed, the twins grew, and their dreams began to grow right alongside them. Their small world, once defined by the market and their tiny home, began to expand with the knowledge they gained from school. One evening, as the three of them sat together under the dim, flickering light of a small kerosene lantern, Kamsi, the quieter of the two, whispered, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor." Her eyes shone with a determination that belied her age. Not to be outdone, Kochi raised her hands excitedly and exclaimed, "Me too, Daddy. I want to wear a white coat and help people who are sick." A smile spread across Obie's tired face, a smile so warm and bright it seemed to fill the entire room with light. He looked at his two precious daughters, their faces full of hope and ambition, and his heart swelled with a fierce, protective pride. He pulled them into a hug and said, "My daughters, you can be whatever you want to be. You can be doctors, you can be engineers, you can be anything. I will support you with everything I have, every last bit of my strength." And as he spoke those words, looking into their trusting eyes, he meant every single one. Their dreams had now become his own. Obie's promise was not an empty one. He began to work harder than ever before. His days started earlier and ended later. He took on any shoe repair job, no matter how small or difficult. When the girls needed new school shoes, he would skip his own lunch for a week, telling them he wasn't hungry. When they needed new textbooks, he would stay up late into the night, stitching sandals by the dim light of his lantern until his eyes burned and his fingers were raw. When the dreaded school fees were due, a cloud of worry would descend upon him. He would borrow small amounts from fellow traders, pray to God for a miracle, and somehow, always, push through. There were many nights when he lay awake on his thin mat, the coins from the day's earnings spread out before him. He would count them over and over, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how he would make it through the next day, the next week. The weight of it all was immense, a crushing burden for one man to carry. But in those darkest moments of doubt and despair, he would creep silently to the corner where his daughters slept. He would look at their peaceful, sleeping faces, so full of innocence and trust. And in that moment, hope would return. Their dreams were the fuel that kept his fire burning. Their smiles were the strength that allowed him to face another day. Years flew by, filled with hard work and sacrifice. Then, one hot, dusty afternoon, a moment arrived that would change everything. The local postman, a familiar sight in the market, was making his rounds. He stopped by Obie's stall, holding two crisp, official-looking envelopes. The twins, who had just finished secondary school and were helping their father, saw the envelopes and ran toward him, their faces alight with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Daddy! Daddy! Look!" they shouted, their voices trembling. They had been waiting for this for weeks. Obi's hands, calloused and stained from years of labor, trembled as he took the envelopes. With his daughters huddled close, he carefully tore one open. Inside was an admission letter. His eyes scanned the words. Kamsi had been accepted to study medicine at a prestigious university. His heart swelled with joy. Then, Kachi tore open the second envelope. Another admission letter. She, too, had been accepted into the same medical program. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over Obi. His daughters had done it. They had achieved the impossible. But almost immediately, a cold wave of fear followed. He looked at the fee schedule listed on the letters. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything he had ever imagined. How would he pay the fees? How would he provide for their accommodation, their expensive textbooks, their medical materials? That night, he barely slept, his mind a whirlwind of joy and terror. But one thing was certain. He had brought them this far. He would not, could not, let their dreams die now. Day turned into weeks. The deadline for the first tuition payment loomed. Obi tried everything he could think of. He put aside every spare coin, saving with a desperation he had never known. He went to the few people he knew who might have money, swallowing his pride to borrow what he could. He worked double hours, his body screaming in protest, his hands bleeding from the constant work. But it was like trying to fill an ocean with a spoon. It wasn't enough. Not even close. Then, one evening, as he sat defeated in his small house, his gaze fell upon the structure itself. It was old and needed repair, but it was his. The only property he owned in the entire world, a small piece of land and a house inherited from his father. It was his only safety net, his only anchor. The thought of selling it filled him with a primal fear. Selling it meant he would be homeless, adrift, with nothing. But keeping it, he realized, meant his daughters' futures would slip through their fingers. The two futures he had worked his entire life to build. He stood up, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. He looked up at the heavens and whispered to himself, "Let their wings grow. Even if mine must break." The decision was made. He sold the house. With the money, a sum larger than he had ever held, he paid their first-year fees in full. He rented a small, clean room for them in a student hostel near the university. He bought them new clothes, stacks of textbooks, and all the supplies they would need. He gave them what little was left for their feeding, pressing the notes into their hands. At the bustling bus station, surrounded by noise and chaos, he hugged them tightly, his heart both breaking and soaring. "Go and shine," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Go and conquer the world." He watched the bus pull away, carrying his entire world with it. He never told them the truth about the house. Some sacrifices are meant to live quietly in the heart of the one who makes them. With no home left to return to, Obi went back to the only place he knew. The market. It had been his place of work for decades. Now, it would become his home. At the end of each day, after the other traders had packed up and left, he would clear his small walk space. He arranged 2 old, broken wooden benches under his work table, creating a makeshift bed. This was his new reality. When the rains came, they drenched him, leaving him shivering and cold. The cold nights of the Harmattan season shook him to the bone. The mosquitoes, a constant buzzing menace, feasted on him endlessly. These same people who had whispered about him before now mocked him openly. "See, Obi." They would jeer. "He used to be a homeowner. Now he's a street sleeper." Another would add, "And all for what? For female children who will forget him." The laughter stung, but Obi's spirit had been forged in a fire of love and sacrifice. He would simply offer a gentle, sad smile in return. Because every night, as he lay on his hard wooden bed, staring up at the dark, empty market stalls, he would close his eyes. And in his mind, he would see a vivid picture. Two brilliant young women in crisp white doctor's coats, their faces confident and smiling. And that vision, that dream of a future he had made possible, warmed him more than any blanket ever could. Months turned into years. The seasons changed, but Obi's life remained the same. He grew thinner, the hardship etched into the lines on his face. His hair, once black, turned a dusty gray. His back, once strong and straight, became permanently bent from years of sleeping on hard wood. But his hope never wavered. Every few months, a letter would arrive from his daughters, filled with stories of their studies, their challenges, and their successes. Each letter was like a dose of medicine for his weary soul, renewing his strength and his resolve. Sometimes, strangers in the market, new traders or regular customers who noticed his plight would show him small acts of kindness. A woman might leave him a bottle of clean water. A food vendor might offer him a plate of hot jollof rice at the end of the day. A kind word of encouragement from a passerby could lift his spirits for hours. One day, a young man who had grown up in the area and watched Obi struggle over